Good morning. To recap on the order of proceedings for today, we'll complete Mr Mitchell's evidence now. We'll then call Mr Hall from the Department of Human Services, then Mr Harkins from GDF Sewers and Karen Andrew, our community witness. If Mr Mitchell could come back forward.
Mr Mitchell, I remind you that you have been sworn in under oath and that you are still subject to that oath.
Good morning, Mr Mitchell.
Good morning.
We ended yesterday by talking about the impact of the fire and the resultant smoke and ash on the council's own operations. I'd like to move now to some other areas. On page 13 of your statement, under the heading item 9, you elaborate on a matter that was raised in the council's submission about confusion and challenges during the recovery phase. And at paragraph 67, you say that, 87, the recovery phase has seen the DHS, the Department of Human Services and the council share the lead recovery role, which has necessarily involved working through new issues which the council has not had to conform to before. The usual state of affairs after an emergency, for example a bushfire, is that council leads the recovery effort. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And in response to the mine fire, we see a different arrangement for the first time in the city of Latrobe. Can you explain how the current arrangements vary from the usual arrangements for recovery?
Well, the current arrangements were it changed in as much that in terms of the response phase, it was normally the response phase was normally very quick. This time the response phase was a prolonged area in terms of the nature of the event, and in that response phase we were required to support the chief, the fire commissioner, and the other agencies. And then usually in an event we'd move quickly to recovery phase, and that's when the council was in sole control of that and responsible for it. This time was the first time that in the recovery phase we had a dual control in terms of DHS and the council.
How did that come about? How did it come about that DHS is involved in the recovery phase?
Well, that was a legislated or a government decision in terms of the fire recovery response and management.
So, just to be clear, it's not a legislative position.
No, but
the usual position under the Emergency Management Manual of Victoria is that council will lead the recovery phase.
That's right.
How did it come about that DHS is involved in this recovery?
Well, this was come down through Mr. Lapsley and his powers, that where it was decided that we would have dual recovery management.
All right. And you say in paragraph 87 that that's involved some new issues. What are those new issues?
Well, it just adds complexity, I guess. And previously, the council organisation, we'd been organised and trained on the basis that when we got into the recovery phase, we were the lead authority. This time, managing dual management, if you like, you've got more relationship issues and coordination issues to actually undertake.
So is it the reality that DHS is leading the recovery with assistance from council?
Well, you could say that, yes.
Yes. Moving to information distribution and communications, I thought a good place to start might be by asking you about the communications resources that council has at its disposal. How many communication staff does council employ?
3.8 equivalent full-time.
3.8 equivalent full-time. And when there is not an emergency happening, what are their day-to-day responsibilities?
Well, their day-to-day responsibilities are to support council and the administration in communicating effectively with our whole range of stakeholders, community, internally and also external stakeholders.
All right. Can you give us an idea of who those communications staff are and where they fit within the organisation?
Well, we've got Emma Lewis and we've got Shook, who are basically one's the acting manager of communications and the other one's the coordinator of communications, and they have support staff.
All right, so there are two, if you like, communications practitioners with 1.8 full-time equivalent support staff. Have I understood that correctly?
Well, some of the support staff, I'd say, are good communication practitioners as well. So they're, in my opinion, a highly competent group, and they perform their task very well.
No, the inquiry is not directed at the competence of your staff. It's really trying to get an understanding of what resources are available to council during an event which clearly required communications well over and above your normal operations.
Yeah. Well, we had to supplement our communications team. We had a specialist media person brought in who was in fact funded by the CFA to provide support for both our staff and also our council, and particularly the Mayor and myself.
All right, and who was that?
That was Shamali, I forget Shamali's last name, but...
Never mind.
Yeah.
And was she from an external consultancy or actually from the CFA?
No, she was sourced through the MAV.
The Municipal Association of Victoria.
Yes, that's right.
Now, you tell us that Council had a two-part communication strategy. What were the two parts?
Well, the two parts were, firstly, we were supporting the event and incident, and secondly, we were responsible for communicating issues about our own services.
All right. So when it came to support, did that involve any more than being available and present at joint media events?
No, the support was provided by way of us providing input into the incident control centre, and also being a conduit, if you like, between community and the people within the centre, and I guess providing input too from council's perspective in terms of the event and the matters that had to be taken into consideration.
All right, so input into the communication strategy and a conduit for information from other agencies. Have I understood that correctly? Was there more to it than that?
Well, it was a question. Our comm staff they monitored social media. They undertook consultation with various groups, because naturally, an event like that, we had a lot of community contact.
Yes.
And our staff made every effort to provide the factual grounding about issues and matters which community were raising and other stakeholders were raising, and putting that into the incident control centre for their information.
All right. Now, we had some evidence yesterday about MJPIC and its regional equivalent, which I suppose is called REMJPIC. Was council involved at the regional level?
We weren't initially, and about 2 weeks into the event, I think on the 17th of February or thereabouts, we were actually invited, the 21st of February actually, we were invited to join both those public information committees. And from our perspective, I think that worked much better. And I think also, I think communication, from I think many people's perspective, improved from that point.
All right. So from that, the start of the second week of the fire.
Yes, it was on the 21st of February.
21st of February.
So when we had both Emma and Shook were actually embedded into both of those public information committees, and that certainly enabled better integration.
All right, so perhaps it would have been useful if that had happened at an earlier stage of the fire.
Well, hindsight would, yes. I think, would support that view, yes.
Well, we all have the advantage of hindsight here, don't we?
We do.
All right. On page 16, under the heading Item 12, you respond to our request to set out how Council assessed the effectiveness of its communication strategy, and you refer to some feedback from the community that was gathered. And can you give the board a sense of what feedback Council was receiving from the community about its communications?
Well, the feedback was from many sources. I've indicated our staff did monitor social media. We had people actually phoning in and talking. We had councillors were picking up bits of information. Officers were picking up bits of information, and with all of that interaction. And we were endeavouring to provide all of those salient points back into the incident centre.
Now, one area for improvement that you identified as a result of that feedback was that there were instances where the call centre was not as up to date as it could have been with information.
Yeah.
One example that will be given by a community witness next week is that on hearing on the radio about the Community Health Assessment Centre, he rang Council, which was not able to give him correct information about where the Community Health Assessment Centre was. So that's consistent with paragraph 96 of your statement, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
It is. And then we identified there were issues there, and then we actually had daily briefings where someone would, we had daily briefings within Council with all the relevant staff, and then we'd have the call centre staff briefed on the issues and information that were raised the day before.
The call centre staff, are they located here in the Latrobe Valley?
They're located at the Traralgon Service Centre, the call centre which was established for that event, the 1-800 number.
So it was a specific,
yes.
An event-specific call centre.
That's right.
Not an offshore call centre.
No.
At what stage did Council change that practice and go to a daily briefing of call centre staff?
I'm just trying to remember.
And I'm asking you because it doesn't appear in your statement.
No, and I'm unable to have a guess about that, but I think it was probably about 2 weeks after the event happened, I think. And another refinement, as you've identified, was Council's involvement in REMJPIC and MJPIC, which yes.
Your evidence is improved the coordination of communication considerably.
Yes, it did.
Yes. The next area I'd like to ask you about, Mr Mitchell, is the clean-up assistance package. The Council has been responsible for delivering. Could you explain how the clean-up assistance package was developed?
Well, the construct of the clean-up package was really input from many different people, and it was, I guess, it was certainly a multifaceted type of approach. There were discussions initially with myself and Premier and Cabinet and the MAV and regarding perhaps the scope of that. Mm-hmm. There were also discussions with David Elder, who's our Community Livability Manager, and his staff, and Local Government Victoria and DHS, and during all of those discussions, there were a series, I guess, of options actually established.
All right. So discussions get underway in earnest in early March, about the 5th of March, is that correct? And that's done by David Elder at the Council, meeting with officers of Local Government Victoria. Was there a formal process, or, for example, an advisory committee set up to work out what the content of the cleaning assistance package should be?
Well, you're talking about locally or in Melbourne?
Either.
Locally. Well, in the local sense, we were endeavouring to understand what the impact was on homes, and we were in close and constant daily contact with our departmental representatives. So the question of clean up internally within the house, clean up externally within the house, clean up within the hard-standing areas, within properties and within the CBDs. They were all matters which we were discussing extensively.
Now, at paragraph 138, you say that Council initially proposed that for people who were undertaking a self-clean, they'd be provided with vouchers up to a value of $150
Yes.
To obtain cleaning products of their choice, and that for those who received an assisted clean-up, a larger sum, $750 approximately, would be spent on each household,
Yes.
which would involve someone coming in to do the clean.
That's right.
Now, that was proposed by Council to whom?
Would have been Local Government Victoria, and Local Government Victoria would then have been relaying that to the MAV, DHS, and Premier and Cabinet. And
Can you explain the basis on which Local Government Victoria became involved? DHS is sharing the lead.
Yes.
In the recovery effort. What was Local Government Victoria's role?
Well, Local Government Victoria, they were our key departmental representative, and they play a major role in terms of the resilience committee and also through the MAV. So there's a close connection with the MAV and the department in helping us as a council take the response areas, in this case clean-up, back into the to the committee and government for approval.
I'm sorry, Mr Mitchell, I just didn't follow that. DHS and Council are leading the recovery effort,
yes.
Sharing the lead.
Yes.
Why is Local Government Victoria involved?
Well, local government.
What does it add to determining what is an appropriate clean-up assistance package?
Well, Local Government Victoria are taking the various options back into government, if you like, into the Resilience Committee, which is...
Are you talking about the State
yes,
Crisis and Resilience Council?
Yes, and there's a process within there that I'm not exactly over, but there's a decision made about what is going to be funded and I guess the scope, if you like, of the recovery clean-up packages.
All right, so Council made its proposal.
So those packages have to actually be approved for funding.
Yeah, so Council made its proposal through Local Government Victoria, which conveyed it to the State Crisis and Resilience Council. A decision was made there and communicated back to Council through Local Government Victoria. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, we would have got through Local Government Victoria.
And after that proposal was made, what was the decision that was communicated back to Council?
Well, the decision was made that there was going to be a two-part process. It was one where there'd be clean-up packs provided, and also clean-up to the range of about $700 for HAC entitled people and HAC eligible
being home and community care.
That's right, yeah. And also people who had actually received DHS relocation payments.
All right, so just to be clear, how did the package that was ultimately decided on at the state level vary from what Council had initially proposed?
Well, the $150 voucher for homes impacted was not provided, and so there was a clean-up kit provided in lieu of that, and the persons around the home, there was a lesser value provided for them in terms of the internal clean and any external clean in the home.
Okay, so there are still two categories. There's the self-clean and the assisted clean.
Yes.
And the package that was ultimately made available for those who were judged to be able to clean their own home was a bucket, face mask, goggles and gloves.
Yes.
2 laundry vouchers per household at a value of $15 each.
Yes.
And 2 car wash vouchers per household at a value of $10
That's
each.
Right.
So that amounts to $50 worth of vouchers for specific things, and the bucket, face mask, goggles and gloves.
That's right.
Before we move to the assisted clean, how has that self-clean package been received by the community?
Well, it's been well used. I think there was something like 840 clean-up packs issued as of today or as of this week. If you ask me what the view of the clean-up packages are, I guess the comments would vary. I think it's fair to say some of the community expressed disappointment in that regard, but then again, there's been 840 packs issued, and I know that some people have come back for a second pack.
And that's been made available, has it, where they've come back and requested a second?
Yes, it has.
Second bucket and set of vouchers?
Yes.
Not to put too fine a point on it, Mr Mitchell, the self-clean package that was made available was inadequate to the scope of the task of cleaning up after the fire, was it not? It didn't meet the need that people had to clean their homes.
Well, I think that would be a judgment that different homeowners would make.
Yes.
I'm not in a position to indicate whether it was unsatisfactory for many. But
Mr Mitchell, I think you are in a position to indicate your opinion. Council proposed a more generous self-clean package, did it not?
Yeah.
And so it must have been Council's view that more generous self-clean package was appropriate, or more appropriate, to the need that Council had identified.
I think it's fair to say we would have preferred the original package put up. There were, I guess, a lot of complexities about the scope of the packages that were being discussed. But I suspect you'll be asking about the roof cavity area as well, which was the clean-up of those areas, which was a very complex matter.
Yes. So before I do ask you about the roof cavity areas, it must follow that it was Council's opinion, and you're the Chief Executive of the Council, that a more generous clean-up package was appropriate in the circumstances.
Yes, you'd have to conclude that. Yeah.
And the decision to offer the clean-up package that was in fact made available for those in the self-clean category was not made by Council, was it?
No, not at all.
Are you able to identify who within the state government made that decision?
No, I'm not.
Right, moving now to the the cleaning of roof cavities. Again, let's look at what Council first proposed and what was ultimately provided.
Well, for clarity, the Council did not propose anything. What the Council actually did, we undertook an assessment of what the cleaning of roof cavities would actually entail, and so that was a discussion which was going back and forwards between the departments, and in fact it was raised with me by senior government ministers and our local member. So we come to one point where myself and Alan Wilson, who's the managing director of Alan Wilson Insurance Brokers, and also a contractor, we met and actually undertook I suppose, a very broad metric in establishing what the clean-up cost of roof cavities would actually entail. And that basic cost estimate has been provided as part of my statement.
Yes, so that's part of your statement at attachment 11.
Yes.
And there's an estimate that removal of installation and removal of roof cavities, or essentially the cleaning up of roof cavities and the replacing of insulation, would cost about $6,500 per house.
For an average 20 square home. Yeah.
All right. And there are other cost estimates given there for cleaning window coverings, so curtains, blinds,
yes,
and also soft furnishing and carpet.
That's right.
All right. So
and also solar panels, which was another matter that I guess some of the community had actually raised with us.
All right. So you say in paragraph 144 of your statement that memorandum was provided to Russell North, who is the state member for Morwell.
And
what
and
happened
also
next?
His
Has there
advisor,
been,
I think, Lee Bacon.
Has there been any decision taken to provide assistance with cleaning roof cavities?
No, there hasn't. For the only assistance there is being provided for those people through insured companies in some instances.
Yes, and we heard about the outcome of that from Brooke Burke yesterday, did we not? That insurance companies, or at least GIO in her case, had decided to make a goodwill payment towards the cleaning of a roof cavity.
That's right. But those companies, I think it's fair to say, only made those ex gratia payments with considerable representation by Alan Wilson from Alan Wilson Insurance Brokers, and that was an initiative which Alan and the council actually agreed we'd undertake, and I know that we're very grateful for the strong supportive role which Alan's played in that process.
And Mr Wilson, to be clear, is an insurance broker who's been available here at the Community Information and Recovery Centre to give advice to people about where they stand with their insurance and claims that they might make.
Yes, he has. They've been located, one of his staff have been here one day a week, but they've also been available for direct calls, and Alan has indicated that the call side's been quite actively used, and he's also been, I guess, successful in arranging with one underwriter, I think something like 200 homes with a $5,000 ex gratia payment, and there's also been movement with a couple of other insurance brokers where they've actually now agreed, and I think there's one more currently being negotiated.
But for those who don't have insurance, or for those who live in rental accommodation, that issue remains unassisted.
That's correct.
Yes. Before I move to the question of assisted cleans and what the council proposed and what was ultimately provided, can I ask you about the high pressure cleaners that were initially included in the equipment that would be made available for those undertaking a self-clean? Whose idea was that?
That come out of discussions again with council and departments such as local government Victoria, and the idea there was that we would actually get a range of high pressure water jetters to actually clean down the outside of homes and pavement areas and hard standing, and so that was a concept that was supported, and we actually purchased some high pressure water jets, and then at the same time then one of our local the Guards group, who look as an advocate group in terms of asbestos, raised the issue about what happens if the water jet actually breaks a piece of asbestos in the home, and we then acknowledged that was a very good point, and we undertook a risk assessment there, and it was subsequently decided that we would not issue those water jets to residents.
All right. Now, the assisted clean package that was initially proposed by council, as you've said, was a sum of approximately $750 to be spent on each household, and someone would come in and do the cleaning. Now, what was the package that was ultimately approved? You set that out at paragraph 146.
146, is it? So we, the assisted cleans, actually, we had contractors going in and performing internal surface clean and vacuum and dust, and the council also undertook some cleaning of pavements and areas outside. So those assisted cleans we undertook through accredited contractors.
Now, was the assisted clean package as extensive as the package that council had initially proposed?
My recollection would be that the cost of those cleans was still in the order of about $700 or $800.
All right. And what about the eligibility criteria for assisted cleans?
The eligibility criteria were HAC qualified people, so in other words, our home and community care residents who were already there, and also DHS relocation recipients, and then there was another classification of people who are vulnerable. In other words, HAC entitled people, but perhaps not receiving the formal HAC service.
And while you had anticipated that about 1,800 people, households, would be eligible, to date approximately 800 people have used that service.
I think 840.
840, as we sit here today. Now, there was an issue with the timeliness of being able to actually deliver this service, was there not? When was the announcement actually made that about the assisted cleaning package?
I can't recall the exact date, but in terms of the timing, there was, because as soon as the package had been agreed within government, the Premier made that announcement, and then we, of course, the council had to set about organising the implementation of that announcement. The delay occurred because we actually had to have accredited contractors going into homes. In other words, we had to make sure that police checks and the contractors were credible, so that you couldn't put them into private people's homes, particularly the more vulnerable in our community. So there was a bit of a delay in terms of working up to get to the desired threshold of 50 house cleans or something a day. And another criteria, of course, was that the whole recovery effort was intended to boost the local economy, and so we had a preference for local workers in that process, and it turned out that we subsequently had to augment some of the local work with people from outside the region.
So you said there was a bit of a delay. What was the delay between the announcement of the cleaning assistance package and the first assisted clean that was done?
Look, I can't. It would be in the order of probably 3 weeks, I imagine, before we actually built up to a reasonable outturn in terms of cleans per day. I'm not sure whether my statements actually gives that date.
Well, I've been prompted that the announcement was made on the 18th of March.
Right.
And so it was another 3 weeks before council was actually
I can't be too precise about that, but it'd be a matter of weeks before we actually built up to the required, what we thought was an acceptable threshold, if you like, in terms of cleans per day.
Now, why had council not gone ahead and engaged contractors ready to start the assisted clean-up process as soon as the announcement of the package was made?
Well, you have to actually have a scope of works to engage a contractor. So it would depend upon, whether, for example, we were going to be water jetting the outside of the home. It would depend upon whether the clean-up package was actually going to involve the cleaning of roof cavities. So, you can only engage contractors once you're clear about what that scope of works is.
Right. And when was council clear? On the 18th of March?
Well, we were clear as soon as the parameters, if you like, of the clean-up package had been agreed. So we knew that it wasn't going to entail the cleaning of the roof cavity. We knew it was going to entail a clean-up within the house, and we knew it was going to entail some clean-up outside the house.
Yes. Well, you tell us in paragraph 150 of your statement that council was instructed by the Victorian government not to 151, not to commence any work towards implementing the clean-up process, including taking steps to advertise for cleaning service or obtaining quotes until the details of the clean-up package were formally announced.
Yeah.
Was there a period when the details of the clean-up package had been decided but not yet announced, when council could have gone ahead and done that?
No. Look, by the time my understanding is that as soon as the clean-up package had been decided by the government, they made that announcement, and then we set about moving on and implementing it. In the lead-up, though, we did in fact undertake consultations with a contractor, and in the negotiations, if you like, or the discussions with Local Government Victoria, we actually arranged for the Local Government Victoria representatives and others to come and inspect a sample of homes within the township, so that they could actually appreciate the extent of the ash fallout within the home and also outside the home.
Yes, and that exercise was in the period during which the scope of the clean-up assistance package was still under consideration.
That's right. Yes.
And this was an effort that council made to represent that the clean-up package should be at the more generous end of the range of possible alternatives.
That's correct, yes. And if my memory is correct, that inspection actually took place after we'd heard about what might be the likely scope of the work, and we said, come down and we'll arrange for an inspection of the homes. So there were a number of homes selected as a sample, so that I guess the local government and other departmental representatives understood, in fact, the condition that our residents were enduring.
In any event, the announcement was made on the 18th of March, and it was some weeks, possibly 3, before council was actually in a position to deliver the assisted clean-up package. Well,
I think within the 3-week area, it was before we were actually delivering a reasonable number of clean-ups during the day. That's my recollection.
All right. And given that delay, it would be expected that a number of people would have made their own arrangements.
Yes. Rather
than live in a dusty house with ash on every surface.
That would be my understanding, yes.
I want to ask you about something that Mr Harkins raises in his statement. You know Mr Harkins from GDF Sewers. He says in his statement that he'll be giving evidence about later this morning that in the latter weeks of the fire he discussed with you GDF Sewers' desire to contribute $100,000 towards the clean-up effort. Do you recall having a conversation like that with him?
Yes, I do.
And he says that he was advised that a lot of the clean-up work had already been undertaken and was being funded by state government, and as a result that $100,000 has not been directed towards the clean-up effort. Do you agree with that evidence?
Yes, I would.
That seems unfortunate, does it not, that GDF Sewers wishes to make a contribution of $100,000 towards a clean-up effort and no avenue for that to happen is made available?
Well, I think there were issues, I guess, in how we'd be applying that. Like we weren't suggesting that there was going to be additional scope in terms of the clean-up, and if we were going to significantly expand the scope of the clean-up, $100,000 wasn't really going to make a significant effort there. So if you're going to maintain the same scope, we're probably better off to have that $100,000 allocated elsewhere, and indeed that's my understanding of where Mr. Harkins and his company actually then focused, because we had a range of discussions then about I guess there were three main packages which GDF Sewers actually put out to the community. One of those is the debit card, which I understand is about 90 or 95% expended as of today. So the debit card was a $100 payment made to each household, which they were able to spend within the mall community. So I don't think the effort, I guess the point I'm making is, I don't think the monetary effort provided by the company changed. It was just that the focus of that changed.
The money was reallocated elsewhere.
Well, yes, that's right. Well, when I say reallocated, it was only a suggestion, and we went through the discussion, and it was thought then it'd be better if it was handled within the GDF Sewers package.
Just to be clear, approximately when did that discussion take place? Perhaps you could identify by whether it was before or after the clean-up assistance package had been announced on the 18th of March.
Well after.
Well after.
Well after.
The last thing I'd like to ask you about, Mr. Mitchell, is the very last part of your statement under the heading General Comment.
Yes.
Where you set out Council's strong belief, and I take it that this is a position taken by the councillors sitting as a council, that the livability of the town of Morwell should be prioritised over coal extraction when considering remediation plans. Could you enlarge on that? Given that the board will be looking at issues of fire risk mitigation and prevention next week, which includes rehabilitation of the mine, what is Council's overall view about the future direction that should be taken?
Well, the question of livability and amenity are all, they're key elements for the community, and particularly key elements for Council as the responsible authority in terms of the Planning Act. It's clear that whilst Council is essentially the planning authority outside, if you like, of the mine areas. And I guess we're acknowledging that, again, with hindsight, the location of the Morwell Township and the freeway and the mine in this instance are very close, and when we have obviously attendant risks in that area. We've got other... This region has a vast coal and lignite resource, and clearly, I think in the current government areas, the value of that lignite resource, there's still aspirations to utilise, and what we're saying is that the future utilisation of that lignite resource should be carefully considered, and Council should be a major player at the table when those decisions are made, so that the question of setback, buffer zones, all those things we fully understand, to be very important. The Council should have a major role in actually deciding those issues.
And you say in the last paragraph of your statement that at present Council is not generally a part of those discussions. Although Council is the local planning authority, is it the case that Council is not involved in discussions about development within the boundaries of a mining licence?
No, that's exactly right, yeah. But I think too that, again, if we look back into history, that my own personal view is that when the SECV was in operation, we were essentially, this area was a company town. Mm-hmm. And, the SECV and government made, major decisions. And at one stage there was a plan that Morwell would actually be relocated. and I think that would explain the proximity of the mine, and the fact that we've got the freeway going between that and the Morwell township. I don't think you'd set out to actually plan it like that if you could.
No.
So I guess that again that's a centre point of the council's strong statement that for future use of the lignite resource that we actually need to have a better seat and influence over those decisions, so that the question of amenity and buffer and other areas critical to the community can actually be taken into account.
Thank you, Mr Mitchell. Do members of the board have any questions for Mr Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr Mitchell. I mean, could I pick up this point you've just moved on to about proximity of settlements to coal mines? I asked both the CEO of the EPA and the Chief Health Officer if they had a view about this, and they said they didn't have a view about the proximity of people to open-cut mines, but clearly the council does. I mean, is there a view about how close a mine should be to human settlement?
Well, I guess how close would again depend upon how big the mine is. The reality, now I'm not a technical person, but the reality is that when you have a big mine, you've got a hole there, and Mother Nature's trying to get equilibrium. In other words, we're constantly moving. The northern batter here of the Morwell mine is a highly unstable area, and yet across that area we have, the Princess Freeway, which is, Gippsland's lifeblood. So I guess there's a whole range of questions there. When we talk about what's an adequate setback, we've got to have regard to exactly what the characteristics of a mine are, how deep it is, etc. But ideally, it'd be good if it was, at least 1 to 2 kilometres, I suppose, in terms of buffer or setback. But again, I think you'd need geotechnical information to help guide you to determine what is an appropriate buffer and setback.
And obviously there is the risk of a coal fire in that mine too, and as we've seen here, the proximity of people to an active coal fire is quite deleterious to their health and well-being.
Absolutely. So again, in that assessment, as I said, it would depend upon the nature and scope of the actual operation that you're looking at. So that the question of buffer and setback and wind direction and all those things would actually need to be taken into account, together with, of course, what are the risk management issues within the mine operation.
In your statement, you talk about a possible site west of Traralgon known as Area H. I don't know where that is. Is that far from Traralgon, or how close to settlements would that area be?
I actually have a map there. I'm not sure whether you can see that.
Is this map attached to your statement, Mr Mitchell?
No, it's not.
You've got another map.
It's another map. I figured someone might ask that, but essentially here is the Morwell township. There's the Hazelwood mine. There is Traralgon Pier, and Area H is there. So I can tender that to you if you wish.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So, I mean, just to summarise it, perhaps you can summarize. So, is the Area H actually bordering the city of Traralgon?
No, it's really, you would describe it as being immediately west of the existing Loyang mine and south of the Princess Highway.
And this is under active consideration at the moment, is it?
Well, it's a map which identifies rating 1 areas. So there's probably about 5 rating 1 areas, including one west of the existing Hazelwood mine, and there's also rating 2 areas. And rating 1 and 2, I think they're just indicating that they're most likely to proceed because of coal quality and location, etc.
So I anticipate there's some urgency then in working on this if these things are being considered at the moment.
Well, there is. I think any new, use or extraction of that coal or lignite resource, we certainly need to consider amenity and livability, and particularly, I think, given the recent event where the risks in that regard are obvious.
Does the council have a view about remediation with the existing location of Morwell so close to Hazelwood? I mean, are there things that should be done to reduce the risk of health and well-being threats?
Well, certainly in the council submission, we've indicated that remediation is an issue, and that we'd like to see remediation plans actually established. And I guess one of the other matters we've got, that we've also got some older facilities even within the municipality which have been based or have arisen because of the coal resource, like the old coal to oil plant. And I guess, using some colourful language, I guess those rust bucket type enterprises, we really do need a strategy too that we can address. And since I've, in my appointment since December, that's a strategic issue that I've raised with Council, and we are actually pursuing a strategy so that we can have better engagement with government and other decision makers in terms of a whole range of issues, including, the older premises, rehabilitation, etc. Because they are key community matters which, Council needs to advocate and influence, I think, decisions in that regard.
Briefly, in the council submission, JM2, I think it is, there is a section on information distribution and communications. Do you remember that? There isn't a page number I've got, but it's okay, 0067. There's a section which is labelled information distribution and communications.
I'm just trying to find that now, sir. Oh, yes.
I presume as Chief Executive Officer you agree with those statements there, do you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And towards the end of that section, the Council is really quite critical about the significant lack of health information provided to the community. And that's your position as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So what should we all be doing to improve this? I mean, you've talked a bit about the difficulties you've had with connecting to other agencies providing information through your call centre. I mean, do you or the Council have a view about how the coordination of communication could be managed better, and ways in which you might have assisted with that?
I think Council certainly, I personally see, has a role in coordinating community input and concerns. The question about how best that is arranged is not something that I've actually got a firm solution for you today. If we think about the current event, the Community Advisory Committee, in fact, my understanding was it was an instrument set up so that we could bring in key people and into that area to provide a bit of two-way communication. One of the problems that if you do set up a situation and say, well, we are going to get these key groups there, how do you define who's a key group? And wherever you draw a line, there's also always going to be people trying to say, well, I should be part of that area too. But I do think we can be a little more strategic and sophisticated in the way that we decide how we actually can better coordinate input from community and to improve, communication.
I mean, do you think there's a case for essentially a combined information resource, communication resource between agencies and the Council, rather than, if you like, running separate operations?
No, look, I think collaboration, really a really well-framed collaborative effort is certainly the way to go. And I think, though, that we've to make that run effectively, though, too, we've really got to have, I suppose, committed and skilled people, within that area to ensure that the focus is always about, coordination, and perhaps the interest of the entity, if you like, is not the important thing. The interest has got to be on factual and well-tailored information, if I can make that point subtly.
Thank you.
Just a couple of matters arising from your exchange with Professor Catford. This map that you've provided to the inquiry, where does that come from?
Well, did someone take that map? I think it's sourced there.
It appears to have been produced by GHD, who I understand is a private engineering consultancy. But what status does the map have?
Look, I can't... I understand that GHD were engaged to actually produce that report.
By whom?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that.
All right. Well, without that information, the map's actually not of much assistance if we don't know what the status of the map is or who commissioned its production. Do you think you could clarify that and
I'm more than happy to
provide the inquiry with that information? And the other matter arising is I'm not sure that you actually answered Professor Catford's question about what Council's attitude is to remediation of the mine, particularly those parts of the Hazelwood mine that are closest to the Morwell township. What would Council like to see done in future, both in terms of remediation or mitigation of what we now know to be a very significant fire risk?
Well, the simple answer is that we'd like to understand exactly what the remediation plans are and what the time frame for those remediation plans are.
All right, we'll stick around next week. You'll find out that information in the course of next week. Beyond having a better understanding, does Council have a view?
No, I think the Council would have to understand exactly what the implications and options and management issues were in terms of remediation. The Council is not expert in that area.
Thank you. I understand Dr Wilson for the State has some questions for you, Mr.
Well, just before you do, Ms Richards, I guess it's on the related point, but Council, in its submission, Mr Mitchell is talking about the prioritisation of livability. Could you just explain that a little bit further, please?
Well, I guess we're saying that the amenity and aesthetic and health issues of a township have got to be uppermost in our minds. And I think this community has contributed significantly, to the competitiveness, if you like Victoria as a competitive entity in economic terms. And I think there's a feeling within the community that Victorians and people interstate have had advantage of our low-cost baseload power, and which has supported, in the past at least, a strong manufacturing industry, etc. But we perhaps haven't had, enough consideration in other terms. So that would be one stream of response. The other one is that the needs of the community must again be uppermost in our minds, so that a community like Morwell, for example, doesn't suffer a detrimental impact from industrial operations around. So I hope that answers your question. The solution is clearly in the planning for future events. I guess we are where we are at the moment, but how we undertake planning in a remediation sense in terms of the existing establishments is important. How we undertake planning and execution for future resource development issues is obviously critical, and they're the areas where we can, make significant improvement.
Thank you.
Follow briefly. does that raise then the whole question about the future of the valley and its economic and social development? I mean, I think clearly this has been a setback. We have to try and improve on the situation, but there's a bigger picture here, isn't there, about where this community is going, and you know, what is the council's view about that? I mean, do you have a vision for the future, and how would other agencies help you with that?
Look, I think council and the community, we're very optimistic about our future, and we've got, I think the strength of Gippsland is that it's got you know, abundant natural resources, and I'm personally confident that the lignite resource will in fact be better utilised with the advent of new technology, you know, and lower emission areas. We can see a future where in fact the lignite resource could in fact become you know, low emission baseload power, and in that sense be the batteries, if you like, for renewable energy sources. But at the same time, we think that, I guess, the setting with energy policy provides you know, this region with, if we have better energy setting or better policy settings, we're very confident that this region will continue to play a role in you know, in energy production, and it should. But I guess what we're saying is that as we take up that challenge, we've got to be more conscious of amenity and I suppose the well-being of communities.
If the board pleases, Mr. Mitchell. Paragraph 88 of your witness statement refers to the date 14 May as the date when you signed the official documentation that transitioned the event into recovery mode. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
That date being May was not obviously the actual date of transition, I take it. Is that right?
That's correct.
But this was an official document that you had to sign, albeit that you signed it a bit late.
That's right.
And do we understand, therefore, that even though you might have signed the official record for the transition, work in the nature of recovery work commenced as soon as possible after the fire was declared safe?
That's correct.
Yeah. So if we work on a date in March as being the date on which the fire was declared safe, work in recovery mode began on and from that date, and possibly even earlier, progressively increasing in its intensity in the recovery mode from that date. Is that right?
Yes.
Well, does it follow that recovery work was well underway and even at an advanced stage by the time that you signed the official document on 14 May?
Yes.
Right. Do you agree with me that one of the essential keys, if not the key, to effective recovery work is collaboration?
I do.
Collaboration of you as a council, state agencies, community itself, and all persons who have an interest in getting the job done quickest, most effectively, and to the satisfaction of those affected.
Yes.
Now, so far as agencies beyond your council were concerned, you've given us some of the names of state agencies, but it's fair to say it involved a huge array of state agencies. Do you agree with that?
I do.
We've heard of DPC, LGC, DHS, DEECD. We'll get the acronyms to Member Pettering in due course if need be. But at all events, an enormous array of government agencies were involved in the collaborative effort of the recovery process.
Yes, that's correct.
It had to be done that way to be effective, correct?
Yes, I agree.
Now, we know that a number of vulnerable people were affected by this incident, and do we understand, therefore, that DEECD, the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, was intimately involved in particular in the recovery work?
They weren't intimately involved in our preschool and maternal and child health care decisions, but they were involved in their areas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that involved them being actively involved almost on a daily basis, giving advice and providing whatever input they could do.
Yes, that would be a fair statement.
And they otherwise helped, I take it you'd agree, in the coordinated effort to assist you, to assist the vulnerable.
Yes.
I take it you're quite happy with the assistance they gave you.
Well, as a general comment, I'd have to say that every government department were doing their best to help.
Yeah. Now, to that end, the state of Victoria granted $2 million by way of financial assistance to the affected community. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that was made available for the clean-up effort. And is it correct to say that the financial regime worked on a reimbursement basis?
Yes.
So $2 million was there to be basically drawn down and reimbursed to the people who were involved in the clean-up effort.
Yes.
Now, have I got these numbers right? So far, the amount of $900,000 to $1 million has been expended in the clean-up effort?
It would be more than expended. I think we've submitted a claim for reimbursement of about $900,000.
Right. Now, do we understand that to mean, given that no doubt the recovery work in the nature of clean-up has probably been done to completion by now, is that right?
It's being cleaned up. It hasn't quite finished, but there's some clean-up areas that are still being done.
And even though you may have incurred expenses of about $900,000, you still have an additional possibly 1.1 available to you to make good the clean-up effort.
There is some funds still available.
Yeah, it's 1.1 or thereabouts, $1 million.
Well, I'm not sure of the exact today, but the point is we've spent more than the $900,000.
Yes.
The $900,000 is a claim which has just been approved.
But the simple point I'm trying to share with you, Mr. Mitchell, is there is still a vast amount of money that can be applied in the clean-up effort.
Yes.
And do we understand from the information you've given to us so far that no one has been refused any financial assistance if they've asked for it, for the recovery effort?
Well, those eligible for financial assistance have got it.
Yeah.
We want to be clear about this. People have made applications, but they have been refused.
Well, of course, I'm only talking about eligible people.
Yeah.
I mean, someone's not obviously going to be eligible if it's not for a purpose related to to the fire. Now, you mentioned in paragraph 144 of your statement that on 11 March, the local government staff toured the affected properties. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Who were the local... how many local government Victoria staff were involved in the tour that you mentioned?
I think there were two, but I'm not sure about that.
And you took them to see either the whole or a representative sample of areas that needed to be cleaned up and the types of things that needed to be done?
I didn't take them. David Elder, our General Manager, Community Livability, did take them on a tour of selected properties.
Yep. And thereafter, is it correct to say that the state has assisted with the acquiring of costings for the cleaning effort?
The acquiring of...
Costings?
Yes.
And has assisted actively in cleaning schools? Is that right?
Yes.
Also actively assisted in cleaning aged care facilities and early childhood centres?
Yes.
Is it also correct to say that various state agencies have assisted by the provision of advice between your council and Treasury, for example, about eligibility for payments under the Natural Disaster Relief and Recovery Assistance Scheme?
Yes.
I missed that answer.
Yes.
And is it also correct to say that local government Victoria chairs a subcommittee of the Mine Fire Recovery Committee? Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Actively participating at that level as well. Can you help me with this? Local Government Victoria staff, is it correct to say that has made over 30 visits to Morwell to provide emergency management advice?
They've made many visits. I'd be surprised if it wasn't over 30. Yes.
Yeah, but possibly even more, to your way of thinking. Is that right?
Well, could be, yes,
Yeah.
I'd say so. We saw them frequently.
And Local Government Victoria has offered council, your council that is, senior level representation to assist in the managing of critical local issues associated with the fire.
Yes, I agree.
You speak in paragraph 134 of your witness statement of a large number of discussions involving representatives of the state of Victoria. Large can mean different things to different people, but the long story short is, and I hope you agree with me, that various people from various government agencies have been actively, continually and helpfully engaged with your council in the recovery effort for the benefit of those affected.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Now, during the period of the fire, is it also correct to say that your council was under a period of restructure? Or change, at least?
Well, certainly change. We've got... I was appointed on the 24th of December, and during the period of March, I did undertake an organisational review, a structural review of the council administration.
What date was that, if you can help us?
Sometime in early March. We actually made the decision earlier than that because, and I had a conversation with the council on my first council meeting with them in the 28th of January, and we agreed that given the fact that we had 5 divisions, 3 of those had acting positions, so 3 general managers had left, so we had 2 in substantive roles, that we needed to undertake a review, and the council was happy with that to be done.
That necessarily involved the loss of key people and with it a degree of accumulated knowledge. Is that right?
Yes.
Timing wasn't wonderful for that, but that was the consequence of the restructure. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. But in that stage, I'd brought in a consultant early in March, so there was consultation going on within the organisation.
And at the risk of stating the self-evident, with any change of important organisational people, a getting up to speed time is involved for the successor.
Yes.
Transitions have with them the necessary side effect that people take time to become familiar with what the job involves, and it just so happens that time in getting to know the new job took place during the currency of this event.
Yes, that's true.
You'd probably describe that as not a great time to be making these organisational changes, but that was the fact.
That's true.
How many people were involved in the restructure? You've mentioned 3. Were there people of a junior level as well?
Yes. As I said, Cheryl Woolard, who was the consultant selected, come into the organisation early in March, and she was there over a period of about 3 weeks on a couple of days at a time, and so she was available within an office so people could pop in and provide her with comment on the organisational effectiveness, I guess. And then she produced a report which outlined 3 options.
We don't really need to go into that. But so you mentioned, is that 4? Were there any more than 4 people of an organisational nature affected by the staff turnover during the currency of the fire?
No. Look, we were still all in. Acting roles at that time.
We have spent a bit of time yesterday looking at the Maryvale closure. Do you recall being questioned about that?
Yes. You mean the Maryvale preschool.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, would you mind helping us, if you can? All council centres closed on the 10th of February. Is
Yes.
that date right?
Yes.
Maryvale remained closed on 17 and 18 February.
Yes.
Is that right?
Maryvale remained closed from the 10th of
Yeah, that's right.
February.
And in fact relocated to Moe on 24 February.
Yes.
Can you help us with the date that it returned?
I can. I think it was after Dr. Lester had indicated that it was safe to return to Morwell. I'm just looking for my statement now. The 24th of March.
Oh. And this morning you spoke of a significant lack of health information and you pointed to a note on the screen. No doubt you being, occupying the position that you did in the council, were very keen to stay up to date on a daily basis with every health issue,
yes.
or every issue of health information as given on a daily basis by Dr. Lester. Is that right?
Yes.
You did, in fact, get that daily information from her and tell whoever asked about it? So is that, you have to answer because the recording device only records what you say.
There was very regular information and interaction from Dr. Lester, from John Merritt, the EPA, and Craig Lapsley. So we had regular meetings, making a distinction between every day and their involvement with us.
No doubt you were telling your constituents that they needed to go to all the websites, all the social media information, all the newspaper, radio announcements, TV broadcasts and every other evolving piece of information that was unfolding as given by Dr. Lester and others.
Yes.
You made it very clear to anyone who asked you that they had to keep up to date with the information on the fire and its air quality effects as it was evolving.
Yes, we advised people in that manner.
That was the best source of the information to your way of thinking, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. If the board pleases, those are the questions of this witness.
Board please, might I just ask a couple of quick questions of Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Mitchell, you were asked questions about a $2 million fund for clean-up by Dr. Wilson a moment ago.
Yes.
And you said, if I heard you correctly, that about $1 million of that has currently been spent. Is that correct?
Well, I said that I'm expecting more than that has been expended by council, and what I have said is that we've made a claim for $900,000, which has recently been approved.
Yes. I'm
not sure how much we've expended, but certainly in excess of $1 million.
I understand. And of that 900,000 odd for which the council has made a claim, does that include money spent in relation to the assisted and unassisted clean-up programs that the council helped roll out?
Yes.
And those programs, the assisted and the unassisted programs, had to be approved by the relevant state government department, did they not, before the council was able to roll out those programs?
Yes, that's correct.
And in relation to the remaining $1 million odd in this fund, is it also the case that the council needs specific approval from the relevant state department before it's able to expend those remaining funds?
That's correct.
And has the council put in a submission, to your knowledge, to the relevant state department about how it would like to see some or all of the remainder of those funds expended in the clean-up effort?
We have got discussions underway.
Yes. And as we sit here today, has any approval been given as yet by the relevant state department for any of those additional programs?
I'm not able to answer that right now.
I have no further questions.
examination. Dr. Wilson asked you whether anyone who had asked for financial assistance with the clean-up had been refused it, and your answer, as I understood it, was that the council had refused assistance to those who were not eligible for the assistance package. Is that correct?
Well, people come in and ask for assistance,
Yes.
and if they weren't eligible, well, then we'd have to say, no, you're not eligible.
Yes, and that's what council has done.
That's right. Yeah.
And the eligibility criteria were fixed by the state, were they not? Not by council.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So council hasn't been handing out clean-up assistance outside of those eligibility criteria, has it? No. It was also put to you by Dr. Wilson that there was a vast amount of money still available for the clean-up. Now, it is the case that the $2 million clean-up package was first made available on the 18th of March, is that right?
Yes.
And your evidence this morning has been that it was some weeks before the assisted clean-up was being delivered to those people who were eligible for it at a satisfactory rate.
Yes.
And you also agree, do you not, that there were a number of people who had already made their own arrangements to clean up their homes?
Yes.
And so were not able to avail themselves of the assistance package that was offered.
That's my understanding.
And just one last matter to be completely clear, the Maryvale Crescent Early Learning Centre was closed on the 10th of February and did not reopen until the 24th of March.
Yes.
It was relocated to Moe Place from the 24th of February.
Yes.
So at no stage while the fire was burning were children attending at the Maryvale Early Learning Centre.
No, that's correct.
Thank you. There was just some confusion in Dr. Wilson's question about that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Members of the board, please. The next witness is Alan Hall. I call Mr. Hall.
Please state your full name.
Alan Gordon Hall.
Please raise the Bible and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
to this Board of Inquiry
to this Board of Inquiry
will be the truth,
will be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Good morning, Mr. Hall.
Good morning.
Mr. Hall, can you confirm for the transcript that your full name is Alan Gordon Hall?
Yes, I can.
Mr. Hall, you hold the substantive public service position of Director of Performance Regulation and Reporting in the Department of Human Services.
Yes.
And you also, importantly for purposes of this inquiry, are the State Recovery Coordinator, a statutory position under the Emergency Management Act 1986.
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Hall, for the purposes of the inquiry, have you made a witness statement dated the 20th of May 2014?
Yes, I have.
And just this morning, the inquiry has been notified that some changes need to be made to some of the attachments to that statement. Are you familiar with those changes that have been notified today?
Yes, I am.
I don't want to go through each of those because the substance of the statement is not affected by
That's
those.
correct.
The statement remains as it was prepared by you on the 20th of May.
It does.
Can I just ask you about one date in it that appears to me to need amendment? It's at paragraph 85. think is on page 19. Yes, do you see there's that date there, the 6th of March 2013? That should be 2014, should it not?
That's correct,
Yep.
yes. Thank you.
All right, so if we can make that change, and with that change being made, have you read through the statement before coming along to the inquiry today?
Yes, I have.
And are the contents of your statement true and correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll tender the statement.
Yes, that would be exhibit 56.
Mr Hall, as you've already told us, the position of State Recovery Coordinator is created under statute in the Emergency Management Act. And as you say in paragraph 4 of your statement, the holder of that position is a senior officer appointed by the Secretary of the Department of Human Services to ensure the overall coordination of recovery activities across Victoria.
That's correct.
And you've held the role since January 2011.
Yes.
And who was your predecessor in that role? Sorry, I withdraw that. Who held that position in the aftermath of the Black Saturday fires?
It was held by Pam White.
Pam White.
Yes.
You explain in some detail the roles performed by the State Recovery Coordinator, and I don't need to take you to those in any detail, but I do want to ask you about what you say at paragraph 22 about the future of the role. You explain that when the Emergency Management Act 2013 comes into operation on the 1st of July this year, the position of State Recovery Coordinator will cease to exist, is that right?
Yes, the position I hold is under the previous legislation, the
Yes.
86 Act, which I understand will disappear at that point.
Yes. And you say that there will be a new Emergency Management Commissioner, and I don't think it's any secret that that will be Mr Lapsley.
That's correct.
The holder of that position will be accountable for recovery coordination with the power to delegate.
That's
that.
correct.
Are there any plans that you're aware of in place for how that's going to work in a practical sense?
Yes, so we expect that responsibility will be delegated to the Secretary of the Department of Human Services.
Right.
And that I expect that at that point she will appoint someone, probably me, to
Yes.
continue the role that I'm currently playing. And that's forecast for the next 12 months.
Yes.
At this point in time.
All right. Thank you. I want to ask you a little bit about the interaction between your role and particularly the Department of Human Services and the Council in the recovery role after the Hazelwood mine fire. You deal with this at paragraph 32 of your statement. Have you been present in the inquiry hearing room this morning whilst Mr Mitchell has been giving evidence?
Yes, I have.
Now, you heard Mr Mitchell give evidence that DHS, the Department of Human Services, led the coordination of relief and recovery operations and was supported by Council. Did you hear Mr Mitchell say that?
I did hear him say that.
In fairness, he also agreed with the suggestion from Council assisting at a later point that the role was shared. You put it slightly differently. You say that that DHS supported the Council in that role. Now, this may all be semantics or it may be significant. Can you clarify the position for us?
I can. It remains the Council's responsibility under the emergency management legislation to manage recovery at the municipal level, and that remains the case. The Department of Human Services has responsibility for coordination at both the state and regional level.
Yes.
And in doing that, we obviously work with the municipalities that fit within a region, I guess. We don't do that in a way that takes away from the responsibility of the Council, but we're very conscious of providing every assistance we can so that the Council is able to deliver the services they need to in a responsive and timely fashion. And I think that's what we've been doing with the Latrobe City Council.
Was it your experience during the recovery period in Morwell here that there was confusion on the ground about who was ultimately responsible?
No, I don't believe we saw that at all.
All right. Paragraph 61 of your statement, you refer to a matter that was dealt with in evidence yesterday when Mr Bain was giving evidence on the subject of communications. I don't think you were with us yesterday, were you, Mr Hall, when that
Only
evidence
for the
was
last
being given?
part of the afternoon.
All right. I asked her a number of questions about demographic information that she was using to inform the communications response. And is that what you're referring to at paragraph 61, the provision of demographic profiles from ABS to government agencies and departments? We're talking about the same thing?
I think we are, yes.
All right. That was provided on the 17th of February, as you explained in paragraph 61. It's obviously important information, isn't it, to inform the communications strategy in relation to an incident like this. What did it involve, the gathering of that information? Is that a difficult task? Is it a time-consuming task? Can you help us?
We sourced it from a number of public websites, and it was demographic information around the nature of the community, the income levels in the community, and various other statuses of community health and well-being, I guess. And it just gives you a picture of gives you a picture of the uniqueness of a particular community. It wasn't that hard to get. No.
It seems that that's information which could easily be pulled together at an early stage in an incident like this, could it not?
Yes.
Is there any reason why it wasn't until the 17th of February that information was drawn together?
No, I think that's simply when we got to do it.
Okay. Was there a request for it earlier? That's what I'm really getting at.
Sorry, no, there wasn't. We did it as part of our own workup of relief and recovery activity that we'd be undertaking, and since this event was starting to become a longer event,
yes,
we started to go into more detail about the nature of it and the community that was involved.
All right. I asked Mr Bain yesterday, and I should ask you today, given the helpfulness of information like that, it would be useful, wouldn't it, if it could be available as part of the planning for possible incidents like this in the future for a range of areas. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. And do you know if anything's been done from the recovery side of the exercise to achieve that in the future? Is that part of existing plans, or is it being considered?
It's one of the things that we're thinking about as we go forward into the next season, fundamentally to do a lot more of that in advance.
Right.
Mr Rosen, just before you move on to the next topic,
Yes.
The question you asked Mr Hall was around the clarification of roles, Council versus Department of Human Services, and you attest, Mr Hall, that there was no confusion on the ground. And I think I heard that differently from Mr Mitchell. So could you give me an example? I think your statement uses a few case studies. So could you give me an example perhaps of where the decision-making was initiated by Council rather than Department of Human Services?
I'd perhaps if I go back to some of the other disaster work we did in relation to floods in particular.
I'd like to know about this incident, the Hazelwood mine fire.
All right. We have, in our experience, councils vary in capability and capacity to implement the municipal plans that they've put in place, and our experience has told us that when we get a sense of that, it is better to intervene early and to provide assistance to support councils at an early stage. In this case, the example would have been, I think, around the preparation and the implementation of the clean-up package. There was a concern, for example, that activity should take place in as timely a way as possible and as speedily as possible. And where we make the observation that it's not progressing, I guess, at a pace that we might have liked, we put extra resources in to help the council do the work to take it forward. So that would be one example. There would be another example, for example, in relation to community engagement, where at one point we were aware that there was a need for more effort in that space, and we employed a person on a contract basis to give to the council to provide extra support in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Mr Hall, if I could change topics and ask you about the assistance program that you refer to in your statement, and this is at paragraph 75. You note that the activities of the department in relation to this incident fall under general guidance that is in operation or was in operation in Victoria before this fire started, and you list the natural emergency events that can trigger the operation of those as being in paragraph 76: bushfire, flood, storm surge, landslide, earthquake, meteorite strike, tornado and tsunami. They're obviously prepared for a wide range of natural disasters. You say at paragraph 78 that the Morwell mine fire falls under the general guidance because it was started by a bushfire. Is that right?
That's correct.
So if it had been a fire that had started in the mine, then these assistance programs would simply not have been available. Is that right?
That's correct.
On the 28th of February, as the inquiry is heard, the Chief Health Officer, Dr Lester, made a recommendation to residents living in the south area of Morwell that they should temporarily relocate away from the smoke. You set out in your statement from paragraph 80 onwards discussions that had taken place presumably before that announcement was made by the Resilience Committee, have I got that right? The SCRC,
the State Crisis and Resilience
State
Committee.
Crisis and Resilience Committee, that there would be an eligibility for relocation assistance that would be available to people that were affected by that announcement. Is that right?
That's correct.
We know that the announcement was made by Dr Lester at about 1:30 in the afternoon. Had the committee met that morning? Is that the position?
The committee had met that morning, that's correct.
Was that a meeting that took place in Morwell or in Melbourne?
No, it was in Melbourne.
Okay. As I understand your statement, that the assistance package and the scope of the advice were very closely related. Is that right?
Yes.
So, for example, and we'll go to this in a bit more detail in a moment, Mr Hall, but a person falling within the category of the vulnerable people who happened to live just north of Commercial Road was not entitled to access the relocation assistance package.
No, that's not correct. The area of South Morwell, as it became known,
yes,
was clearly related to the advice, as I understand it, from the EPA and then from Health. Our instructions to staff were to take a liberal approach, if you like, to that definition and to use their judgment about the circumstances of individuals living in the proximity, if you like, of that boundary of Commercial Road, and to take a generous approach, if you like, to how they assess claims for people. So we did not want to be in the position where someone on the south side could get support and someone on the north side could not, when it's not that exact a boundary in terms of how it might relate to people. So a vulnerable person or a person in the vulnerable categories that the Chief Health Officer had described there, who was living in the proximity of that area, we treated quite reasonably and provided support to them as well.
Perhaps I could bring up a map of Morwell, just get some clarity around this if we could. So if we look at that area south of Commercial Road there, and just if I can take, for example, Davy Street. Now, you're probably not as familiar with the geography of Morwell as we are, but Davy Street is a location that is just north of Commercial Road, at the very western end of Morwell. So I think it's being indicated there.
Right.
You see that? I think that's... My eyes aren't quite good enough, but I'm pretty sure that's Davy Street. It's just being increased in size there. If we think about that location as being and its proximity to the coal mine, and then if we can move in an easterly direction along Commercial Road to the Sacred Heart School, which is just there, and obviously there's people living in the vicinity there. You'd agree, wouldn't you, that people living in the vicinity of that school fall squarely within the location identified by Dr. Lester, as referred to as South Morwell, but may in fact be geographically further from the mine and the smoke and the fire than someone living in Davy Street?
Yes.
Yeah. As I've understood your evidence, the way that the Liberal view, as you say, of the location of South Morwell was not applied as arbitrarily as perhaps one might think from the delineation of people living south of Commercial Road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, without asking you to refer to specific cases, do you know, Mr. Hall, whether there were people living north of Commercial Road who were provided with relocation assistance?
It's my understanding there were some, yes.
All right. Do you have any idea of the numbers?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Is that information that would be available?
Yes, it would be available.
Could you source that and provide it to the inquiry, please?
Yes, we can do that.
All right, thank you. We've heard evidence that there was a meeting involving Dr. Lester and Mr. Merritt from the EPA and Mr. Lapsley, the Fire Service Commissioner, where there was a discussion about the proposed advice and to whom it would apply. Were you a participant in such a meeting?
No, I wasn't.
All right. Just so that's clear, there's been reference to a map that was examined which showed, from the EPA as we understand it, which showed areas particularly affected by the smoke and particulate matter from the smoke. That's not a map that informed your decision in relation to this relocation assistance package?
It's a map that informed the health advice, I think, and our decision related directly to the health advice.
Yes, I understand. Now, in relation to the way...
Sorry, Mr. Rosen.
I'm sorry.
Any advance on that map?
Looking to my left expectantly. Making inquiries is the position. We'll explore that.
Thank you.
Returning to the decision, we have the announcement at a press conference on the afternoon of the 28th of February by Dr. Lester, and then, as I understand your statement, the way in which the relocation assistance package was communicated was by a letter drop to people in South Morwell. Is that correct?
That was part of it, yes. There were a number of ways that it was made available, so I believe there was media announcement about it.
Right.
And I think there were advertisements about the hotline that you could contact DHS on as well, in local press and so forth. And we had a high level of take-up of calls to that 1-800 number from people seeking that assistance.
Right. That's the DHS hotline that is referred to in the leaflets that were letterboxed. Can we just go to the first of those leaflets? This is attachment 19 to your statement, and it is referred to in paragraph 84. That's it.
Yes.
You tell us in your statement that there were two versions of this document. Is that right?
There were changes,
There were some changes made. This was, however, the first one which bears the date, the 28th of February. And was that the one that was distributed on the afternoon of the 28th of February? Is that what happened?
I believe so, yes.
When you say you believe so, Mr Hall, that was an important issue, wasn't it? This announcement was made on the 28th of February. For a lot of people, as a practical matter, they needed immediately to know, well, I've been told to leave, but, you know, it's going to present financial difficulties for me. What's available? Do you agree with that?
That's correct.
Okay, so are you able to say on your oath, Mr Hall, that the document that we're looking at, this first version of the advice, was placed in people's letterboxes on the afternoon of the 28th of February?
Yes.
It sets out on the first page the vulnerable groups that are identified, and we've heard a deal of evidence about that. We can just go to the second page under the heading "How much money is available." We can see that there's a reference to the personal hardship respite payment, which had already been available at this time.
That's
Is that
correct.
right? And I'll ask you a little bit about that in a moment. But this new payment, the personal hardship voluntary relocation payment, for a person to be eligible, they had to tick the 4 boxes, didn't they? They had to be in a vulnerable group. Is that right?
That's correct.
They had to live near the mine in the South Morwell area.
That's correct.
Just in relation to that, it was well understood at this time that there was a view from Melbourne, if I can put it that way, that the South Morwell area meant south of Commercial Road. I'm not sure the locals tended to think of that as being South Morwell, but they soon understood that that was the perception from senior government officers. What was done to communicate to people that if they lived north of Commercial Road, that the liberal view that you described would be applied to them?
We had a general message that anyone who was suffering hardship as a result of the circumstances in Morwell and needed assistance should contact us on the hotline and talk to us about what might be available. So we saw that as a way of capturing everyone in a very simple way. And you know, we had over 10,000 calls to the hotline from the community, which I think was a high proportion of people who we understood had understood that message and made use of the line.
How was that general message conveyed to the population of Morwell?
In all of the ways that we talked. So I think it was communicated in the messaging that we did through media. I think through the advertisements that we did in the local paper, and certainly in the way that we talk to people generally.
So that's the second box that needs to be ticked. The third is that you have demonstrated hardship conditions. In your statement, you refer to that as the need to prove that the person was of low income. I'm looking at paragraph 88, and you say, for example, receiving a pension or benefit.
Yes.
Are they the same things, proof of hardship and proof of low income? Are you seeking to convey any different things by those two references?
Hardship as a result of the continuing emissions from the fire, I guess, is what we're saying there.
Yes.
The reference to proof of low income is not necessarily the same thing, but it was clearly an offer of assistance that was being made to people who had less ability to manage their own circumstances.
So do I understand that hardship and proof of low income are not the same thing? Hardship means being affected by the fire.
Yes.
Proof of low income, self-explanatory.
It's proof of low income.
Is proof of low income. And that's not referred to in this flyer, is it? That there was a need to prove low income to be eligible?
No, I don't think it's not drawn out explicitly.
It's not mentioned at all, is it, Mr. Hall?
It's not mentioned at all, that's correct.
Nor is it mentioned in any of the subsequent versions of the same document. You can look at them if you want to, but I'll ask you to accept that from me if you would, please.
No, I accept that.
Why not? Why is that not mentioned in the community information leaflet?
I don't know, to be honest, because it was clear when people called the hotline, that was one of the clear issues that was talked about in terms of eligibility and people making appointment. It would have been clearer to have had it in here, I think, as you say.
I'm more interested in a more substantive question, I'll put it that way. Why was that part of the eligibility criteria? Why was proof of low income required?
That's been a condition over all of the grants that have been applied in emergency relief and recovery circumstances, except for relief payments, and relief payments weren't being made in relation to this event because of the nature of the event. Relief payments are made to help people who've been, if you like, not able to live in their homes for whatever reason, as to help with the provision of immediate benefits such as food or clothing or accommodation. It's a one-off payment that's normally made in other emergency settings. In this case, people weren't exiting their homes in the same way, and that's why these two different types of grants were put in place, because the traditional grants really simply didn't apply.
Yes. So, sorry, is your evidence, Mr. Hall, that was consistent with the approach that had been taken in relation to other similar emergency hardship programs? I understand. And just before leaving that, having a low income and having a healthcare card, for example, are not synonymous, are they?
No, they're not.
How was that applied? Was that also applied liberally? In other words, were people who had low incomes but were not the recipients of a Centrelink entitlement, did they also fall under the eligibility criteria?
Yes, it was not tied explicitly to a Centrelink entitlement. They tend to be used as examples, but they're not hard examples in that sense.
Okay. Was there a perception in the community that you had to have a Centrelink entitlement? Did you hear that?
There was early on,
yes.
And in fact there was a perception that it only applied to people who had healthcare cards, and we believe that started in the early days of the operation of the call centre, and when we became aware of that, we corrected what was being said from the call centre, and we arranged for them to ring back the people who'd been not allowed, not given appointments, to talk with us on that basis. So we believe we covered off the people who were affected by that more rigid advice, I guess, that went out in the first instance.
Can I ask you about the other payment, the $500 payment, which had been in place before the advice that was given on the 28th of February? The decision to make that available was made on the 20th of February. Is that right?
That's right.
Why was that made nearly 2 weeks after the fire started? Why wasn't that a decision that was made earlier, when it was clear that people within Morwell were seriously affected by the smoke?
That was made in relation to the health advice again, which talked about, which advised people to take respite from the smoke when they could.
But that advice had been given well before the 20th of February, had it not?
And yes, and I guess a number of other ways of providing respite had been put in place ahead of that. I think it came down to our experience of people. So we opened the respite centre in Moe, for example, and council provided transport to that for people and so forth. I think when we started to hear a range of stories from from the community about options they might have had to take better respite had they had some financial support to do it. So the example that lingers in my mind was a family that had relatives in Adelaide that they needed petrol money in order to be able to go over there and stay with them. And that was the sort of example that we used back up through the State Crisis and Resilience Council, arguing for the need for some new form of financial assistance to be made available. There was no existing grant in the grants that we had that you could apply and that applied in this circumstance. So we needed to, if you like, set new policy for something new to be applied, and that's the discussion that went on. I think it was partly the view that the event was going to be a much longer one than had been anticipated in the early days, and I think the experience of people who were taking the advice to take a break but who clearly would have had more options had they had some financial support to do so, and we argued strongly for the ability to do that.
I assume that your position is that this grant was applied generously and liberally as per the other money that was made available to the community?
Yes.
I just want to ask you about one statement that is before the inquiry. It's a statement of a gentleman, Mr. Ray Whittaker, recipient of an age pension. This is Exhibit 42. Mr. Whittaker was unwell when he was due to give evidence, and his statement was tendered in his absence. But he does refer to, at paragraph 20, to receiving the $500. He refers to it as the relocation allowance. I think, strictly speaking, it's in the first category.
I presume it's the respite one. Yes.
I think it was. He explains that he's an age pensioner and he was caring for his adult son, who is a disability pensioner. And he says at paragraph 20, I received $500, my son received nothing, and we were given no explanation for this unequal treatment. We applied for the relocation money at the Senior Citizens branch in Morwell, where we were interviewed by a lady from DHS. He goes on and complains that he feels he wasn't well treated by that lady. I'm not concerned about that second part, but given that you say one of the things that was taken into account was disabilities of other household members, does it surprise you that Mr. Whittaker's son was not also given that money? Because he said it had a significant practical effect.
We were giving the grant was for a household rather
Yes.
than an individual, so
Yes.
I'm not aware of whether his son was living with him, and they would have collectively made the household, I guess.
That seems to be the case. They were living
case.
together. Yeah, but you do say that there was scope for providing up to $1,250 per household. At the discretion.
At discretion, yes.
Yeah. So does it surprise you that the discretion in this case wasn't exercised in favour of providing more money to that household than the $500?
I have no knowledge of what matters he would have put forward in relation to that, to be honest. So I don't think I can reasonably answer that.
Right. If we can come back to your statement, please. I want to ask you some questions about the clean-up, and I think the clean-up assistance program. I think you've been in the hearing room when Mr. Mitchell explained that the Latrobe City Council put up a proposal about clean-up. It would include, for example, assistance to clean roof cavities and some other areas. What was ultimately determined was, not to put too fine a point on it, a less generous package than the council was proposing. Do you agree in broad terms that that's what happened?
In broad terms, yes.
Yeah. And were you involved in the decision, in that decision?
In part, yes.
And why was it that that the council's proposal was not accepted?
So the council was one of a number of parties that worked to put together a range of options, I guess, for government to consider in relation to clean up, and there were other government parties involved in that as well. There had been no real precedent in emergency management work to provide clean-up of domestic premises. So there was no precedent on which to base what a reasonable approach might be. There were ultimately 3 levels of proposition that came forward, and government settled on the middle one rather than the low one or the high one. So I wasn't part of the process that made the actual decision of which one will they do, but those processes certainly came up through me.
The position's this, isn't it, Mr Hall, that ultimately government made a decision about how much money it considered to be a reasonable allocation for the clean-up of houses in Morwell.
And I think that's the $2 million figure that we've heard about, yes.
You say in your statement, paragraph 157, that it was a generous contribution. That's your view?
Yes.
Yeah, you say it twice, in fact, so you think it really was generous.
Generous against the fact that in the past there's been no provision provided to people, and there may not be in future emergencies either. So in that sense, the giving of support in this way was generous in my view, yes.
Yeah. You understand that there is a view within Morwell, not a universal view, but a view that that would take issue with that description?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Mr Whittaker, once again, I don't think we need to go to his statement, but in quite a colourful way, describes it as a Mickey Mouse response to the clean-up program. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that's typical, but you would have heard that sort of response to the assistance that was provided.
I've heard a variety of views expressed
Yes.
about it, both positive and negative, yes.
I want to ask you about one aspect of it, this question of the use of high-pressure hoses. Do you know whose idea it was to make high-pressure hoses available as part of the equipment?
No, not directly. I know it was part of the early proposals, and I know that there was a concern in relation to the impact it might have on asbestos around properties, and it was taken out on that basis, as I understand it.
Yes. We understand from the evidence of Mr Mitchell that not all of the $2 million that was made available has in fact been spent. You say the same in paragraph 157, don't you?
Yes.
You say that demonstrates the generosity of the package. Is that right?
I do.
You do, and you hold to that view?
I think if there's more money provided than has been drawn down and used,
yes,
yes, I think that goes to that point.
It's also consistent, though, with the evidence that because of the delays that Mr Mitchell referred to in the rollout of the program, that a lot of people just went ahead and cleaned their houses at their own expense, doesn't it?
I think there have been people who had insurance cover which provided for independent extra cleaning for them. I think there were many people who were cleaning their houses throughout the entirety of the event, and that was the people who were not relocating, who were continuing to live here. And so, yes, that's true. The delay, in the question of the delay, I mean, the announcement was made by government, I think, the day after Dr Lester indicated that it was safe for people to return.
Yes.
And I think the question as to whether you would have started clean-up while the circumstances of ash and so forth were still happening was part of the view there, that the event needed to move through and come to an end, in effect, before you then started on what you'd hope would be a once-off clean-up process.
I don't think the concern is so much about the delay before the announcement on the 18th of March. As I understood Mr Mitchell, he said an announcement's made on the 18th of March and the council is then placed in an invidious position because it wasn't ready to roll out the program. The cleaners hadn't been accredited and sourced and so on. You understood that was Mr Mitchell's
It was my understanding that clean-up started to happen and that council already had resources there to some degree, and I think as Mr Mitchell said, it took a while to build it up to a higher level, and
yes.
In the end they had to reach beyond the local resources, I guess, to bring in extra support to do it quickly. So there was a concern that the clean-up could be carried out, the assisted clean could be carried out in a speedy and timely way, and that did warrant a ramping up, I guess, of activity to try and bring that about.
It would be preferable, wouldn't it, Mr Hall, for all of that preparatory work, such as the identification of contractors and the accreditation of them with as required so they can enter private homes. Ideally, that would all be in place before the announcement is made.
Ideally, that's correct, yes.
Excuse me a moment. I think they're the questions, in fact I know they're the questions that I have for Mr Hall. Members of the board have any questions?
Mr Rosen, just to explore that issue about the announcement on the 28th of February of the temporary relocation and whether or not the local offices were open.
Yes, yes,
like
I did intend to ask that. Do you need me to repeat that question, Mr Hall? It's a matter that's been raised with the inquiry by numerous people, and that is that Dr Lester makes the announcement, DHS announces the assistance package, and one of the places that's identified on that flyer, we don't need to go back to it, but one of the places identified to get further information and more importantly to get some money is the DHS office in Hazelwood Road. The announcement and the letterboxing took place on a Friday afternoon. Was that office open on the weekend of the 29th and 30th of February?
We had three locations open through the weekend, and I think from memory we paid about 103 relocation grants on the Saturday, and I think we paid about another 40 to 50 on the Sunday. And the call centre was open making bookings. We kept that open late on the Friday night so that people who were getting the advice late and wanted to make that contact were able to do so. And the call centre operated all weekend as well.
All right. Just to be clear, the three locations that were identified on the flyer are the DHS office in Hazelwood Road, Morwell.
Yes.
Is your evidence that that office was open on the weekend of the 29th and 30th of February?
Yep, that's my understanding.
Commercial Road Primary School was another location that was identified. That was also... Sorry, I do mean the first and second.
Oh, sorry, yes, the first and second, yes.
Commercial Road Primary School is identified. That was also open and staffed.
Yes.
And the Senior Citizens Hall in Maryvale present.
Yes.
Was it publicised that the DHS office, which presumably is not normally open on a Saturday and Sunday, was it publicised that it was open?
The arrangement we had was that people would ring the 1-800 number and they would be given a specific appointment in terms of a time and a place. So they would have been directed to one of the three offices and given a time over the next day or so. And if that had been the DHS office, that would have been the DHS office.
Yes, to be fair to you, Mr Hall, it does say that on the flyer. They'll ring that number and then they'll be given an appointment time at one of those locations. And just to round that topic off, there were problems with the DHS office in terms of its ability to meet the demand, as I understand it, in the first few days of this rollout?
It was difficult doing this work as well as running the normal business of the office, that's right. So we closed that part down and moved it to another location just up the street.
And we see that in the subsequent versions, that was the change, wasn't it?
That was the change,
flyer,
yeah.
Different locations to go to.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, Mr Hall, was the 1-800 number available on the Friday afternoon and Saturday morning?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I'm quite curious as to why the community is saying they couldn't get through then.
We extended the call centre hours, I think, from about... I think they normally operated till about 6. We extended them to 9 p.m. on the Friday, and it was in operation right through that time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr Hall, thank you very much for your statement. Good afternoon. I wonder if we could just have a brief discussion about the psychosocial impacts of the mine fire, and perhaps we could have a look at your statement relevant to this, which is on paragraphs 179 to 181. I have to say I have found some difficulties with the annexures, but if we were to have a look at what I think is annexure 29, let's see if this is right, and if we could just scan down that. Now, I'm actually looking for the one which is version 1.4, with a date 3/6/14. Whether that could be...
That's the one we were given this morning.
That's the one, yes. I thought this was a very helpful document, particularly if you turn to page 3, which provides an overview of Morwell. If we actually turn over the page, what we're looking at is some of the differences between this population and the state as a whole. And at the top of that page, we have some interesting information that the percentage of persons with high or very high degree of psychological distress is 14.3% here in Morwell compared to a state average of 11.4%. We can see that drug and alcohol clients are significantly higher, mental health clients are significantly higher. So this is a community with above average levels of mental health issues, and clearly the fire caused huge anxiety, distress and worry amongst the residents. So clearly part of the response strategy is to actually attend to their psychosocial health. In your statement, you say you were successful, I read it, for bidding for some assistance to provide psychosocial health support in the next financial year, in para 181,673,500, which I'm sure is an excellent outcome. So my question really is, what support to the psychosocial needs has the department been able to provide in this financial year, and how does this link to your proposals for next financial year? Of course, what I'm particularly anxious about is to hear that there has been a really good response in the last few months to the psychosocial needs of more residents.
I think we would say that the work we've done in a relief and recovery sense, probably from the start of the fire in the mine, has all had a focus on the well-being of the residents of Morwell in one way or another, and in part the provision of the respite support, the provision of the relocation support were all early parts of trying to do that, I think. I think the range of other options, the beeline travel, the entrance to zoos and so forth, were all part of helping people both have a physical exit from the smoke and so forth, but also a way of feeling better about the circumstance to counterbalance what they're otherwise experiencing. I guess health were quite active in that time with the Health Assessment Centre and so forth as well, which was also looking to immediate needs of people. The money that we've sourced here, it is provided in a budget sense coming in for the 14-15 budget, but in effect people are starting to implement that now. We're almost at the point when that budget kicks in, are starting to implement that now. In any case, we did some early work bringing Dr. Rob Gordon in, who's one of the clinical psychologists that we use regularly, who's quite expert in the impacts of disasters and the impacts on communities and individuals, and he works with authorities in the shaping up of plans and activities, as well as he does in educating participants therein about what needs to be provided. We did get that amount of money up, the 673,000. I guess the purpose to which that will ultimately be put is still a bit flexible, and it's coming out of the work of the committees that are operating now within the town to shape up exactly what should and shouldn't be provided, and what the best value will come out of that. So although we put up a bid to government based on a certain set of activities, as you sort of have to do to get to a figure, in the end it's the same approach to being able to use that somewhat flexibly based on experience now as we go forward and the community's response to the various things that are on offer. It's very hard to predict what the response might be for various types of counselling or case support or whatever.
And I suppose the issue really is that it's good that you got this funding which is going to start flowing now, but what support really was being provided in those critical first 2 months when people almost certainly, or some people would have been very upset and anxious and needing support? I mean, I guess the point is this money, worthy as it is, coming a bit late now, that in fact there could have been some more acute mental health support provided in those early weeks and months?
Look, to be honest, I'm not sure what the mental health services experienced in that time. I wasn't aware of any excessive demand that wasn't able to be managed, and had that been the case, I would have thought it would have come to notice. So I hadn't been aware of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's broader than the hard mental health end, but the psychosocial support. I guess the point here is that you've been successful in bidding for funds for this coming financial year. Were there funds you could have used and applied to support the psychosocial needs of the community in this
Well, I guess in
financial
part
year?
we were successful at getting money in terms of the respite grants and the relocation grants, because in total...
Was there only focused on quite a small number of the population and in a particular geographical area, but the whole of Morwell community was suffering from this, not just in the southern parts of Morwell?
Yes, but in relation to the grants, I mean, we made 5,500 grants available, and at a cost of almost $3.5 million in that period, so a lot of money went to support a lot of households.
That's financial assistance, if I could suggest. It's not psychosocial support assistance.
Well, it helped them do things that would make their lives better in that period. It gave them options, I think, that they might not have otherwise had. And we estimate that reached about 65% of the households in Morwell. So it reached quite well. I guess the money that we were able to get in at that particular point went to those specific responses. But we would probably say that they are part of how you start to work with a community as well, which then broadens out in a range of more diffuse ways as you move through a longer-term recovery.
You have mentioned the long-term health study. Will the department be engaged in that? Again, looking at the longer-term psychosocial impact of the fire on the community.
The health department are the ones who will take that forward.
Yes, I understand. But I mean, could your department not also be an active partner in this process, given the broader social impact of the fire?
No, I take your point, and we could at that. In general, it is the health department that sort of looks to the psychosocial issues in a recovery sense. So it's not different from what they might do in other emergencies as well. But yes, I think there'll be a lot of interest in what comes out of that, and it's in its design stage, I think, at the moment. And I know there's been quite a level of community consultation around the content of the study, and I think there'll be a lot of attention placed on what comes out of that as it starts to move forward.
This has been quite a hit on the Morwell community in terms of the sort of roles and responsibilities that your department responds to. I mean, will you be thinking about whether over the next few years you'll need to ramp up the support you can provide to this community in the broad areas that the department offers?
We will be watching that quite keenly. And although we've got a package for, I think, 18 months or the next 2 financial years, I guess that was based on knowledge at the time rather than a definitive sense.
Because, I mean, these
will be over by then. We don't know.
Consequences can go on for very long periods of time.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Mr. Rosen, if I may.
Of course.
Mr. Hall, thank you again for being here today. On paragraph 99, where I'm going to lead to is suggestions for how you may think about, and I understand that the Emergency Management Victoria new framework, which is going to modify to some degree the Department of Human Services' direct involvement, although I think your evidence was it's going to be substantially, in practice, you're anticipating the same.
For the next year, yes.
For the next year, yes. So paragraph 99 is an example of an initiative that was an outcome of the recommendation from the Royal Commission, the
That's
Vulnerable
correct.
People and Emergencies Program. So I commend you on taking the recommendation and implementing that. So I guess for future, this inquiry is thinking about how can we do things better. What would be your reflections on some of the things that you might do better in the future?
Well, I think we've all learnt about the issues of communication and engagement in communities, and I think that's one of the graphic things that's come out this time. From our department's point of view, we made a number of changes following the flood work and the reviews that had taken place there, and I think we probably thought we were in better shape than has probably turned out as a result of this. So I think that's one of the areas we'll look at quite closely as we go forward.
And what do you mean by communication and engagement?
With the community. So I think it comes down to some of the issues around people from different linguistic backgrounds. I think some of the issues that the Koori community I've seen raised in this context. And I think, dare I say it, even to the issues with the flyer that were brought out a bit earlier about the completeness and the readiness of the information to be readily available to people. I think we have relied heavily on a web presence, on having materials available online, and I accept that hasn't worked for numbers of people in this community, and I think that while we have material in, I think, 14 languages available there, it's not much good if you can't actually get to it, I suppose. So we will probably look at how we, in the opening up of relief centres or centres like that we make technology available so that that's accessible to anyone who comes in and uses that as well. And I guess it'll be of interest where the inquiry comes with its recommendations about communication overall. I think it has been sort of noticeable how every department has had its own part of the communication spectrum, I suppose, and looking back at how that's worked this time, you'd have to say that that's probably not the best way to do it from the user's perspective. So, I think we would look at how we might how we would contribute to reducing some of that in the future as well.
So a more integrated, more whole of government approach are you suggesting?
I would think that should be explored, yes.
Anything else other than communication?
From our point of view, look, I think we were strong in the way we were able to adapt a set of provisions that simply didn't apply to this event and get government to the point where they made, if you like, new policy and new grants available, which were pretty much tailored to circumstances, quite quickly, much more quickly than might almost otherwise be the case. And I think we will continue to look at that, potentially that sort of flexibility into the future and that approach into the future, which is more a tailoring, if you like, of response to individual communities. The other thing that we will probably do is a bit of a back-of-house thing, but we are going to increase our own technology in relation to the way that information flows and grants are administered, with a view to doing... We have had some instances where issues of fraud have arisen at this time, not many, but some, and I think in part that's not been helped by the fact that we use a very paper-based system that doesn't really protect against that happening, and we're moving to something which will automate that, so it will be much clearer who's had what sort of support and help everyone, I guess, avoid from overclaiming or perhaps being caught out in that way.
And just lastly, issues about empathy have been raised in statements from the community. And I think Mr Rosen led the evidence from Mr Whittaker, who placed and said that perhaps he, and I'm just going on his statement, may not have been listened to and treated. And I think I've read that in a few other submissions. Do you think that there's an opportunity for more frontline training around community engagement and application of empathy?
There always is, I think, to be honest. I mean, I would have hoped that, given the work that the Department of Human Services does anyway, that it was already in that space. But we bring a lot of people in to work in these events whose jobs are not to do with emergency management, and they're brought out of corporate and other roles. And I think we will look in fact at how we do the training in relation to the outcomes of this event. I think that's a good point.
I think it's important that when people are in a crisis and they're feeling anxious,
yes,
and if they're then not treated with empathy, that's just double pain, and it makes it more difficult. So I'd encourage you to consider that.
And I would hope that, I can't comment on the actual examples, I guess, but I would hope that by and large people have found the experience much more productive than those examples, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hall.
I've been informed that the council has, I think, one question for the witness, and then the state have, I won't hold them to one, but the state have some questions as well. Yeah, offering three.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, you mentioned earlier that DHS were assisting council in the recovery phase. Can you tell the board who's funding the recovery phase of the Hazelwood mine fire?
Who's funding which, sorry?
The recovery phase of the Hazelwood mine fire.
So the money that comes to us is coming through the state. It was in the state budget papers.
I should clarify my question. Who's administering the funding?
In a technical sense, the funds flow through us down to council or other providers. It goes to some goes to departments, some goes to the council. Depends on the activity.
Thank you.
Mr. Board, please. Mr. Hall, you're a member of the State Emergency Management Team.
Yes.
And was that meeting on a daily basis from the 9th of February?
Yes, sometimes twice a day.
And you were in all those meetings?
The majority of them, yes.
All right. You've been asked about the services that the Department of Human Services were offering. Was the response to the fire evolving? Was your response changing on the basis of advice you were getting?
In this circumstance, yes. I guess in the early days, this was not seen to be a long, drawn-out event, and no one quite appreciated what the effect of the prolonged, smoke and so forth would be. So yes, it did change in that.
And effectively, did it change after the weekend of the 15th and 16th? Was it ascertained because of the bad conditions on that weekend that it was going to be a longer campaign than first thought?
I think it became very clear then, yes.
Right. What do you say about the speed at which assistance was given in the various ways that it was given?
In the circumstances, I think it was done really promptly in relation to the circumstances as they unrolled. In the sense that there was no ready-made package of responses that you could simply pull off the shelf and apply, which is how emergency management has worked in other events at other times. So I think the speed with which the governments, the State Crisis and Resilience Council, was able to make new policy, adopt new policy, was really significant. And in fact, we were able to, on the two types of grants that we've talked about, there was about a 24-hour turnaround really between the idea of the grant being accepted and then the work being done to operationalise it. So we pretty much had it operating on the ground within 24 hours of that, and I think that was quite effective.
Almost at the point of record time in terms of the way government operates, would you say?
Yes, maybe.
Where were the various services and supports targeted?
They're targeted to people who are less able to help themselves manage their way through events or bring their lives back on track after an event. I think all of the effort goes to the more vulnerable people in the community or people with a greater level of disadvantage who actively need assistance to help themselves, bring their lives back on track.
Ms. Petering asked you a question about empathy. What instructions were given to as I understand your evidence, you gave instructions that your staff should provide a flexible, generous and compassionate approach. Is that what you were told? Is that what they were told?
We use the words generous and compassionate as the guiding principles of how they should work, and that went partly to the interactions with people, and it went partly to the judgments about eligibility and entitlement, and where the boundary was drawn, for example, and things of that sort.
What was the level of applications for assistance? Perhaps we can break it down. How many calls were made to your 1800 hotline?
There are about 10,300 calls made over the period.
All right, and that's in the context of a community of somewhere between 14,000 and 15,000 people.
Yes.
So two-thirds. There were calls from perhaps two-thirds of the population.
There were probably some repeat calls from people, but it was a high level of engagement, I think.
In total, how many grants were made, either respite or relocation?
We made 4,202 respite grants worth about $2 million. We made 1,307 relocation grants worth $1.2 million. And in total, that was 5,500 grants and almost $3.5 million cost associated with them.
And the grants were to a household, not a person?
Yes.
And so is that 5,500 households received a grant in the context of about 6,000 households in Morwell?
Yes, although some might have received multiple grants, legitimately.
You've talked about the relocation grants and that there was no mechanism in place previously for those to be paid. So this was effectively breaking new ground. Is that right?
That's correct.
So these sorts of things had never been offered before. This relocation grant had never been offered before in any previous natural disaster.
No, not in this way.
And I think your evidence was it may not happen again.
It has been done for this event. If there were similar circumstances, we'd need to go back to government and see whether they wish to do it again, I guess, yes.
All right. What do you say about how DHS and the council were able to work together?
Look, I think it's been productive in terms of the outcomes that it's delivered.
You asked some questions about after the decision was made on the 18th of March with regard to the clean-up grant. There was some 3-week delay after it was announced. Before, I think Mr. Mitchell's evidence was that it took about 3 weeks before there was a substantial number of clean-ups occurring. Did DHS have any involvement in the implementation after the announcement of how the clean-up would work at a practical level?
I think it was mostly local government Victoria who were working with the council in relation to that. We did have an interest in the rate at which the assisted cleans were being completed and the time it might take to get through what we believed would be the number. And we were very keen for the council to make every effort to bring in as many contractors, I guess, as they could to bring the time frame down to the minimum to get those done. And I think they've just pretty much been completed now.
Is it your understanding that about 1,900 homes were given assisted clean-ups?
No, we had the way the package was costed up, it would have allowed for about 1,900 homes. I think the take-up has been around 840, 850, somewhere in that mark.
In terms of the self-clean kit, the bucket and mask and gloves, did your department have any involvement in the contents of that kit and how it was provided?
No, I think that came together at the local level.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Those are the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Just one matter in re-examination. You were asked some questions by my learned friend Mr. Burns about an appreciation of the anticipated length of the incident. And as I've understood your evidence, you say that before the weekend of the 15th and 16th of February, if I've written it down correctly, no one quite appreciated how long the incident would last. Is that a fair summary of the evidence?
That was certainly our understanding. It was unclear at that time, and it was certainly thought to be of shorter rather than longer duration.
The inquiry has before it a situation report from Fire Services Commissioner Lapsley on the 12th of February. I'll just bring it brought up. It's Exhibit 3. I think a hard copy is being placed in front of you. Just scroll down, please. Further. That's it. The evidence is, do you see the second dot point there? So second dot point under the heading Latrobe Valley Coal Mine.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Lapsley's evidence, he was the first witness called. His evidence was that he gave this estimate. Of course, it could only be an estimate, but you'd agree, wouldn't you, that an estimate from someone in Mr. Lapsley's position should have attached to it should be given some weight by others involved in the State Emergency Management team, that the fire would burn for up to a month. Do you recall that situation report being provided?
Not explicitly, to be honest, but I don't doubt that it was.
Yeah. I suggest to you it's consistent with other statements that were made by Mr. Lapsley at that time, that is, around about the 11th, 12th of February of this year. Did you not appreciate that at that time?
Well, I think it was the weekend that brought it much more prominently to our attention, the activity of that following weekend.
All right. You don't, I think you've already said this.
I'm not contesting
no, I
what
understand
Mr.
that.
Lapsley has said at all.
Thanks. I've no further questions for Mr. Hall. Could he please be excused?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
What I propose to do now in the short time we have available before lunch is to call Ms Andrew, the community witness, and we'll have Mr Harkin's evidence after lunch.
Please state your full name.
Karen Grace Andrew.
Please raise your Bible and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give
to this Board of Inquiry.
To this Board of Inquiry
will be the truth.
Will be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Good afternoon, Ms Andrew.
Good afternoon.
Can you please tell the inquiry your full name and your address?
Karen Grace Andrew.
And you're currently employed, although not for much longer, as a youth suicide prevention counsellor at, and I might ask you... Rummiack District Aboriginal Corporation.
Yes.
You've made a statement to the inquiry.
I have, yes.
You have a copy of it there in front of you. And it's a statement of, to be clear, 39 paragraphs, and it attaches a submission that you've made to the inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Have you reread your statement recently, Ms Andrew?
Yes, I have.
Are there any corrections that you'd like to make?
No.
Is your statement true and correct?
Yes, it's true and correct.
I tender that, Your Honour.
57.
And you've lived there since you moved down to Morwell from Queensland in September 2012?
I've lived in Morwell since September 12.
Okay. Now, you're from Queensland originally,
Yes,
and you tell us in your statement that you're of both South Sea Islander and Indigenous descent.
yes, I am.
And before coming to live in Morwell, you were a member of the Indigenous community in around Mackay, where you come from.
Yes.
Can I ask you about the organisation that you work for? Is it Ramayak?
Ramiak, yes.
Ramayak. You talk about it in paragraph 5 of your statement. And that is based at Nindadana Quaranook, the Central Gippsland Aboriginal Health Service, which is here in Morwell.
Yes.
And where in Morwell is your office?
It's on the corner of Buckley and Collins Street on the other side of Commercial Road.
On the other side of Commercial Road. And you're currently employed there as a youth suicide prevention counsellor, but the funding for your position ceases at the end of June.
Yes, that's correct.
I'll ask you a little bit about the Indigenous community here in Morwell. About how large is the community?
I couldn't say how large the community is. Sorry, I don't have a figure.
Okay. And you talk in your statement that there is a very high level of disadvantage among the Indigenous community here.
Absolutely, yes.
You've noted with some families there are 3 generations of unemployment.
Yes.
And it's your personal experience that life expectancy is much lower than you're used to.
Yes.
Are there any other particular features of the Morwell Indigenous community that you'd like to share with the inquiry?
From the beginning of the fires, I noted that Ramiak didn't receive any information that was out in mainstream community, because I was down at LCHS, Latrobe Community Health Service, one day, and I found a flyer on the front desk, and on the flyer it was from DHS, and it was stating the recovery information, and that hadn't filtered through to Ramiak. So I took a copy of that back to work, and we photocopied it. I gave it to our finance person, and we photocopied it, and I've started then attending the meetings for the Hazelwood mines fire.
So that was quite early in the piece that
Yes.
you found that information at the Community
Yes.
Health Service.
It was, I don't know whether it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday of the first week that I took the information to work.
All right. You, we've had a number of information sheets presented to the inquiry, including alerts and advisories from the Chief Health Officer, which are said to be directed to community groups. Did Ramayak receive any Chief Health Officer alerts or advisories during the course of the fire? That you are aware of?
No, not before I started bringing stuff to work.
All right, but the ones that you brought to work you found elsewhere?
Yes.
And as far as you're aware, there were none that were sent directly
No,
to
there
the
was nothing
organisation?
sent directly to the service at the beginning.
You weren't in Morwell when the fires started on the 9th of February, were you? You were in Maui with your mother?
I was shopping, yes.
Shopping with your mother? And your mother doesn't live in Morwell, does she?
No.
She lives in Queensland?
Yes.
And she was here visiting you and your son?
Yes.
So I'm just back at paragraph 13. So the first challenge for you was to find your way home from Maui to Morwell,
Yes.
with roadblocks in place.
Yes.
How did you manage that?
With great difficulty. When I came out of Maui, I couldn't get onto the freeway, so I had to turn around because the police had a roadblock. And there was no signage, and being from this place, I didn't know where else we could go. So I just followed a stream of cars and ended up in Newborough, and then found my way around Tyres to get back. And then we were caught outside Latrobe Hospital on the highway there until we got back home again.
Now, you were contacted by your manager on the Monday, the 10th of February, and told not to come to work that day.
Yes.
But you returned to work on the Tuesday.
Yes.
And your mother was staying with you, and as you've told us in paragraph 16, she's not in the best of health.
No, she wasn't.
What were the health issues she was dealing with in February?
She's in the first stages of dementia, and she's just forgetful, forgets to take her medication, forgets to eat.
And that presented some challenges when you were leaving her at home with smoke in the air outside.
Yes.
What were the things that she forgot?
Hanging her washing on the line, leaving the house open. She wasn't used to being confined to the inside of the house. My mum's from Queensland, and we're gardeners, so she's used to being outside in the sunshine, and keeping the house locked up. She wasn't used to it, and she was leaving the doors open. There was smoke getting inside. She was hanging her washing on the line. There was ash dropping on her clothes. She ended up with a rash on her body, and I feel it was from the ashes that was dropping on her clothes on the line. I had to come home every lunchtime and make sure that the house was closed. There was no washing on the line. Then I was fed and watered, and that, just to see she was safe every day.
And by the 25th of February, you were concerned about the rash that she developed. You took her to the GP clinic.
Yes.
And she saw the practice nurse there.
Well, she saw the practice nurse there, and she didn't think it was a worry, but I thought it was because she didn't have the rash the week before the fire.
And in any event, you organised for your mother to fly back to Queensland.
I did, yes.
At the end of February. What was it like living in your house during the first few weeks of the fire?
I felt isolated because I was sick at the time as well. I had chronic asthma. I've got asthma, and I couldn't get out of the house. Just being stuck in the town area. I was too sick to drive anywhere because I was on a lot of medication, so we just had to stay inside the house because it's an old house I rent. The smoke was coming in the little holes and everywhere else in the house and that, and just being in a confined space, it was quite difficult to live there.
So can I ask you about your own health? You've told us you're asthmatic. You were asthmatic before the fire started.
Yes.
How did the smoke affect your asthma?
It made it very difficult. I had an asthma attack on the sad day after the fires started, and I couldn't leave the house, and I was too sick to even make a phone call. My son was at work. I had no way of getting outside. I was too sick to drive. So I just stayed in the house in case I was in a better place to be.
And you had a number of asthma attacks during the fire, including one at work where you were put on a ventilator.
Yes, and it happened twice at work as well during the fire.
Did you go and see a doctor about your worsening asthma?
Yes.
And what advice did your doctor give you?
The doctor told me to take 2 weeks off and to leave the valley for 2 weeks, but no work, no pay, so I had to stay in the area. I had no money to relocate anywhere, so I just had to go home and sit it out at home.
All right, so there were a couple of difficulties. One was that if you didn't work, you wouldn't be paid.
Yes.
Were you not able to take some sick leave?
I had no sick leave, and I had to take annual leave for the time that I did have off, during the fires.
And then there was a question of paying rent on your house here in Morwell, as well as your mortgage on your house that you still own in Queensland.
Yes.
Did you apply for relocation assistance?
I went next door because it was in the Greek community hall next door to my house, and my son went over first, and then he came back and he asked me if I'd go along with him so we could apply for some assistance, because he was working part-time at the time, and because of the fires his hours had been cut as well, so I had no income, so I had to continue going to work, and he wasn't a recipient of Centrelink benefits, so he didn't have any work and he had no money, so I had to keep working to keep the wolf away from the door for the entire time.
So you and your son went to the Greek church hall to ask about relocation assistance, and were you granted relocation assistance?
No, because we didn't have access to a healthcare card, and we worked.
As you've told us, you live in a rented house, and you've had a couple of particular difficulties with the clean-up. One of them is the water flow that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain why water flow in your household's an issue?
At present, there's a lock on my water meter. My bill went up to $5,500 because there was a leak, and it leaked during winter, and because it's a low house, the water was leaking out underneath the house, and I didn't get a bill until the meter lady came round and read the meter, and it was 2 days before that I'd noticed the water under the house, and I rang my landlord, and I rang the real estate and got onto it straight away and fixed that leak, but it's continued to leak, and there was no one came around to check that that the use of the water was over the amount.
And because of that, and because you and your landlord are still in dispute about who should pay for all of that water, you have a water flow restriction device.
Yes.
And what does that mean in practice for you?
It's quite difficult. It takes 3 hours to do my washing, to fill the machine up. I've got to collect the hot water that runs out of the tap into a bucket and fill up a 20-litre bucket of water to have a shower every day, twice a day. And it's just really quite difficult, and I'm not paying the water bill because I did not use the water.
You also have used a vacuum cleaner from the recovery centre here to clean your house, but you say there's still dust falling from the ceiling.
There's still dust falling from the ceiling into the shower out of the vent in the bathroom.
Have you approached your landlord about having the roof cavity cleaned?
No, I haven't, because it's been too hard trying to get the water fixed up.
Now, the last area I'd like to ask you about, Ms Andrew, is about contact with the Indigenous community during the fire. You've already told us that that information sheets that came into Ramayak were ones that you found elsewhere and brought in. You're not aware of any being sent directly. But you also make the point that Indigenous people, this is at paragraph 35, in your experience need face-to-face contact.
Yes.
Is the internet a useful way to get information to the Indigenous community?
Not the internet, it's social media, Facebook, because a lot of Indigenous people here don't have access to internet, and what I've seen through my work, a lot of Indigenous people here aren't literate enough to read and process the information that's out there, so it's best to speak face to face with people, and that's what I did to the people that came into the service. I spoke to them about where they needed to go if they were sick, and just sat with people and gave them the information. and particularly I was concerned about people with health conditions, older people with emphysema, young mums and bubs.
And Nindadana Quaranook actually made contact individually with clients in vulnerable groups who were sick or who had young children or were elderly, and what assistance was provided to them?
We made contact with all of those people that we had on our register and rang them and asked them to come in, and so everybody would have flu shots and get the information that was available there at work to assist them with anything. They didn't know about the recovery money until I'd mentioned it, because someone had lived down in Maryvale Crescent. There was a client that had come in and he was not aware of that. And he was the first one that came in and spoke to me about that, and then I just referred him on to the recovery centre.
Thanks, Ms Andrew. Those are the questions I had for you. Do any members of the board have questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Members, Andrew be excused.
Thank you.
So if we can resume after lunch with Mr Harkin, he'll be the last witness for the week.